We're going to get started this evening. First and foremost, I just want to thank all of you, parents and students. I see a good amount of students in here, which I'm excited about. One, because I think they're going to hate me after this, but I can handle that. But I'm doing this out of love for all of you, and so deal with it. But the parents and stuff, I'm so thankful just to see so many parents here this evening. Because it really shows a commitment to just figuring these sort of things out and not acting like we don't know what's going on. And so I'm going to start us in prayer this evening because if you're like me as a parent, you need it, right? Amen. I need it, and I'm going to need it for this conversation. I've got a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I'm going to need it for years and years and years to come. And so let us pray this evening before we begin. And so, Father, first and foremost, Father, we praise you. We thank you, Lord, for this time that we get to gather together. Father, for this time that we get to just learn more about what is happening in our world. And so, God, I pray that this evening would be beneficial, Father. I pray that this evening would glorify you, that it would honor you, Father. I pray God, I pray for the parents in this room. Father, I pray for wisdom, for discernment. Father, I pray for perseverance for the parents in this room. Father, I pray that we would be parents that spend our mornings and our evenings on our knees praying for our children. And God, I pray that you would open our eyes to what you desire for us to see, Father, that you would help strengthen us, mold us, shape us, that you would help us be the parents that you have called us to be. And Father, I pray for the students in this room. God, I pray that you would just put a longing inside of them to know you, to pursue you, to love you above all else. Father, I pray for healthy conversations after this meeting between parents and students, between students and students, and between parents and parents. I pray for fruitful conversations. And God, again, we praise you. And we thank you for this time together. And we thank you for who you are. And we pray all of this in your name. Amen. Amen. And this evening, I'm excited, and so let me kind of give a breakdown a little bit of what to expect this evening. In a few moments here, I'm going to share some information, and then after we do that, we're going to have sort of an interview kind of conversation this evening. I'm going to allow these people to introduce themselves here shortly, but one time we're going to have an interview conversation between me and a parent that is here within our Discovery student ministry. And then as that parent is dismissed from the stage, we have 2 lovely women from the Council of Adolescents here in the Hickory area. And then they're going to join me on stage for a conversation as well. A lot of experience is going to be on this stage to have conversation. But at the same time, with a lot of experience is also, we're not perfect. We don't have all the answers, but we are here to be as real as we can possibly be. And the point is to have a conversation, to be helpful in any way that we can. And then after those kind of interview style conversations we're going to have a question and answer time. And so at any point during the night, if you want to jot down a question on a notepad or your phone, I guess we're talking about phones, but if you want to jot it down on your phone, you can write a note down. There's a Notes app, and did you know some other things? I'm just kidding. I'll get into that later, what else the Notes app can do. But if you want to jot some questions down at the end of the evening, we're going to have a question and answer time. And JB is back here somewhere. He's going to bring the microphone around to you. So real simple, you'll just raise your hand. We'll bring the microphone to you. And then all 4 of us will be on stage during that time. And so you can direct your question to any one of us, or you can just ask the question in general, and one of us will pick that up. Okay, does that make sense? Everybody okay with that and how we're going to do that? And then also, another thing as part of this is being recorded as well. And so the important thing about that is this is going to be posted on our social media pages, on our YouTube later this week, okay? And so if you miss something and you say, hey, I want to go back and maybe see what they say, you can watch that, or you can share that with somebody if somebody else is maybe looking for that as well. And then also tomorrow, I'm going to send an email. If you registered, I have your email. I mentioned this right before we started. If not, there's a a clipboard back there with a sort of a sign-up sheet. That's if you didn't register, but you want some of this information that we're going to have, because we're going to have a lot of things talked about, and there's going to be maybe some articles or links or some things that are discussed that you're not going to remember maybe, or you forgot to write down. Well, I'm going to try to compile as much of that as possible in an email for you tomorrow, so you can just have that resource for you, okay? Makes sense? We got it? And then also, the last thing I'm going to say about this is just part one. This is just part one of this kind of conversation. I personally am thankful to have a senior pastor who is willing and excited to have these conversations and allowing us to sort of have this format in this place to have these sort of conversations. And my goal and my desire is for this to be a continued conversation. It's not just a one-time, here's all the answers, here's the solutions, get it together and fix it. No, we are going to continue to have these sort of conversations as a part of our Discovery student ministry and just as a part of Discovery Church. And so I am excited about that. And so I want to start with some statistics, because as I was researching and I was preparing for this, I come across a lot of different statistics, and I want to be able to read some of these things so that we can have a clear understanding of what's in front of us. You see, the title of this evening is The War on Technology, and I use the word war on purpose because that's what it is. That's exactly what it is. This is not something to be taken lightly, this dynamic with phones and social media and just the things that we can have access to as parents and as students and all this is not something to take lightly. It's something that we have to fight for, that we have to battle with. And as a parent in here, you know that. You know parenting is not easy at all. It is a constant battle day after day after day. And so I want us to see some of these statistics. The first one that I want to look at, I mentioned in announcements this morning that our teenagers spend on average 7 hours and 22 minutes a day of screen time. A couple months ago, I took a poll with our own students. Maybe actually almost a year ago, I took a poll with our students, and it was about that number. Amongst our students in Discovery Student Ministry, we had an average of about 6 hours and 45 minutes or so of screen time per day. So it's about the national average here as well. And it also, if a teen spends more than 5 hours a day on their phones, they see, and this is tough to hear, but they see a 71% increased chance that they're going to have suicidal thoughts or even suicidal actions. Okay, I want to be clear with these statistics. I want them to be said. That's 5 hours a day. Okay, the average is 7. If they just do 5, they recommend that teenagers spend about 30 minutes to an hour a day of screen time to have good mental health. Okay. Also, in the ages of 12 to 17 years old, we have seen major depression increase by 52% since the iPhone was invented. So about 2007. Okay, so about 2007, we've seen major depression increase by about 52%. And among ages 18 to 25, that number goes to 63%. And at the same rate, those same young adults that I mentioned, 18 to 25, what many of your teenagers are going to come into, contemplate suicide or act on it, that has increased by 71% since 2007. This one as well, we're going to talk about pornography as well in here. So I mentioned just in the announcement stuff that we have 6th graders and up in here, because we will. We're going to talk about pornography. We're going to talk about sexual predators and these sort of things. And so some of these things will be difficult to hear sometimes, but we need to say them. Okay, it says most statistics on pornography say that the average age of a child's first exposure, now this blew me away, is 8 years old. 8 years old is the average age that a child is exposed to pornography. Now listen to this other statistic. For pornography consumed by people 18 and younger, 10-year-olds make up 22% of that consumption. I'll say it again. 10-year-olds make up 22% of the consumption of pornography by people 18 years old and younger. 22% at 10 years old. It's estimated that 93% of young men under the age of 18 have seen porn. along with 62% of young women of the same age. It's also shown, now most of this pornography is accessed through a smartphone, okay? And so at the same time, by the age of 11, 53% of kids age 11 have a smartphone. And when that goes to age 12, that number increases to 69%. Okay, so 69% of 12-year-olds would have access to a smartphone. Another study shows that 60% of students turn to pornography to learn about sex and to fill in the gaps that they receive from their sexual education they may receive at school. Okay, so 60% turn to that rather than having conversations with their parents. Some things on social media, real briefly, because all of them cover about the same thing. The spokesperson for YouTube, the guy who literally makes his money by the success of YouTube, recommends and says that nobody under the age of 13 should be on YouTube. Okay, the guy who, the more people use it, the more money he probably is going to make. But he says that people under 13 shouldn't use it. Okay, the most popular social media apps for this generation, Snapchat's number 1, TikTok's number 2, Instagram is number 3. Then you go to Twitter and Reddit, and then Facebook is actually only used by 2% of this age, of these teenagers, okay? So Facebook's only 2%, which has gone down a lot. Now, all of these social media platforms, remember, I said the students will hate me after this, but they'll be all right. All of these social media platforms, all of them are able to create fake accounts, okay? And the majority of students, it's very easy to do so. One account where you can see everything, and then another account where only a certain amount of people they allow can see certain things. Also, all of these social media platforms have access to mature content. All of these social media platforms have access to mature content. Now, things like Snapchat and TikTok and Instagram, they work to ban things like pornography, but there's still mature content in there. But something like Twitter does not ban pornography. An app like Twitter where you tweet back and forth, whatever it is, they allow pornography on their social media apps. And all of these social media apps are also used by child predators. All of them. Every one of them is used to prey on children. Last thing I'm going to touch on right here before we look at some scripture. There's also secret apps, okay? I'm going to say these things. There are secret apps. If you pulled out your phone and just went to your app store and searched private photos, that's it. Private photos. I've done it today. I showed my wife. I showed JB. I said, this is ridiculous. If you just search private photos in there, there is app after app after app that is designed for somebody to have on their phone to look like something else that they can then touch, go into, have a passcode, and have a whole new thing in there. Okay, so I want you to do this later so you can see it because it's ridiculous. And I'm upset about it as a parent. These apps, the icons for them look like the calculator. And so on your phone, it's just a calculator, right? The other ones have music notes. Just music notes as the icon. There's numerous ones with a calculator. Another one just has like files. So it just looks like a file saving app. Another one looks like the Pandora logo. Okay, so as parents, if you are looking on a phone, it looks like a calculator. But there's a whole nother world that is behind that. And can I also say this? One of those apps that looks like a file, when you go into the app store, you have an option to review the app, to actually submit what amount of stars you want to give this thing. And so obviously not everybody does that. I don't review many things on the internet, but 684,000 people have reviewed the one that just looks like files. 684,000 people have taken the time to review it and to give it 4 stars or 5 stars or whatever it is. So just imagine the amount of actual downloads. The one that has a calculator, it's like 60,000. And then there's another one with the same calculator that has 12,000, and so on and so forth. Okay? So I want to show that it is a war. If you didn't know that already, I want to show that it is a war on technology. It is a war for our children's souls, for their minds and for their hearts. Matthew chapter 6 and verse 22, Jesus says, the eye is the lamp of the body. And if your eye is healthy, then your whole body will be full of light. But we know this, if your eye is bad, then your whole body will be full of darkness. Psalm 119 verse 37 says, turn my eyes from looking at worthless things and give me life in your ways. This scripture here is so significant to us because as parents, when we see what it says in Matthew 6 and verse 22 and verse 23, and it says that the eye is the lamp of the body. If it's healthy, then it's good. It's full of life. It's important because as parents, we are responsible for what our children see. We are responsible for what they see because what they see then penetrates their heart and it penetrates their mind and it penetrates their soul to the place where it affects them as human beings. Not just temporarily, but for a lifetime to the point where it affects them as they become parents and it affects them as a spouse. And so we as parents are accountable for controlling, for protecting, for putting boundaries up for these sort of things of what our children see. I'm going to be brutally honest here. In my time as a youth pastor and just even as my time as a parent, my wife and I have heard numerous times from people that, well, I just don't know. I didn't grow up in this sort of, I just can't figure out what all these sort of things are doing. There's too much. It's overwhelming. And yes, I understand it's overwhelming. There is a lot, but can I be honest? Ignorance cannot be an excuse when our children's soul is at stake. Ignorance cannot be an excuse anymore. We are capable. As parents, we are capable of reading articles, of doing research, of listening to podcasts, of finding videos on these sort of things, of picking up a phone ourselves and figuring out what it can do, of taking our children's phone that the majority of you pay for and saying, hey, let me see what you are doing. Let me see what you are looking at. We have that right as parents. I'm not sorry, students. I'm not. Because that's the last thing I'm going to say. I'm not sorry, students, because I have conversations with some of you as students. And I have conversations with you where you're facing depression or you're facing suicidal thoughts or you're just in a dark place. And listen to me, my wife and I are more than happy to have those conversations with you. But I would much rather have less of those conversations because you are putting in work and your parents are doing what they need to do to make sure that your mental health is in the right place. I'd much rather have less conversations. I'll have them, but I'd much rather have less. I share these things out loud with you in the room and with your parents in the room because I love you, because I care for you, because as you students, my wife and I see you as our own children. We hurt for you. We are broken for you. When we know that something is going on, we feel that for you. And so I'd rather have much less conversations. Now that was a lot. And I'm going to transition. And Bob's going to love this because I'm going to set him up right into this. And so Bob, if you could join me on stage here for a few minutes or so, we're going to begin this conversation this evening. And part of this conversation here, you can see I don't necessarily have any notes in front of me because I want this to be an organic conversation. There's things that I know we're going to touch on. There's things that I want us to dive into. But first and foremost, Bob, could you introduce yourself, your family, your children's ages, and those sort of things to everybody?
Yeah, we're gonna throw away all our phones now after that. Yeah. It's sobering for sure. My name is Bob Fincher, and Autumn and I have 3 kids. Will, our son, is our oldest, and he's 14. And our girls, Carson and Claire, are 12 and 10. So 8th grade, 6th grade, 4th grade. Perfect. Is kind of where we are.
Perfect. So as I mentioned earlier, as a parent of a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. Okay, so I read that, and I've researched those things, and I'm a millennial. And as I was researching, I realized I don't know half of what is going on when I thought I knew everything. So I feel overwhelmed. Am I alone?
No, I mean, it's insane to try to even think about keeping up with everything that we have out there, that's out there. I'm a techie guy. Like
Right.
I like the technology. I like to be sort of on not the cutting edge per se, but I like all that stuff. It doesn't scare me. It's something that I kind of enjoy. And years ago, before Will even had a phone, we started having this conversation in our house. Me and Autumn, like, look, they're getting ready to give Chromebooks out.
Right.
Like, I don't know what's going on in the internet space. I don't know who's monitoring, who's managing, but I'm going to figure some of this out. And so
Right.
that's kind of what we started doing a few years ago.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so one of the statistics I read said that by the age of 12, 69% of 12-year-olds have a smartphone. And so my wife and I have had this conversation with a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. We've had a conversation, okay, when do we give them a phone? Like, when do we allow them to have a phone? And, our natural instinct and our fearful instinct maybe is never. Like, I'm never giving them a phone. They're never going to get one. It's never going to happen. But the reality of it is they may need one. There may be some things that they need. And sometimes we think of the flip phone conversation, and I see the pros and the cons of that as well. But I want to speak specifically. I want to be realistic and recognize, okay, I'm not going to stop 69% of 12-year-olds across America having smartphones. But can you give me some advice, and even us here as we're listening, and how you've managed that? Because your children have two of them do have smartphones, correct?
Yep.
So how do you allow them to have an iPhone while still feeling somewhat comfortable with that? What are some things you're able to put into place?
Well, it started for us really as an open conversation. Okay, so before Will got a cell phone, got a handed down iPhone, I found an article that talked about the dangers of social media to teens, and the technology that's available and why it's so destructive. And he read the article, and I said, you got to give us a book report. Okay.
Yeah.
So he had to come back and talk to Autumn and I about what he learned. And part of the conversation really was, I didn't have to grow up like this. I didn't have this concern. I didn't have access to all this stuff. I know as an adult right now, like, we do a really crappy job of managing our own situation on social media. Just in the political climate we're in, like, it's just disappointment everywhere, right?
Right.
In terms of what we're sharing and what our friends are sharing and all that. We're bad at it. How can a 12-year-old be good at it?
Right.
And so we started that conversation, and basically part of the initial kind of requirement was, this is a responsibility, okay? It started out, Will was going to camp out of state. He was going to a lacrosse camp up in Pennsylvania. We wanted him to be able to stay in touch with us.
Of course.
So it was just a phone. It was just a phone to text, and that was it.
Right.
But then it became there was this sort of probationary period where there's certain things, there's restrictions that you can put in place. And so I think that's probably what you were asking about. On your iPhone, I don't know, parents, you probably know this to some extent. You can go into your settings and you can get to the screen time, and you can pull up what your screen time is. When Tristan was talking about the averages, you can pull up what your average, your daily average, your weekly average. You can monitor and manage all that. But what you can also do is set up a family account, family sharing. And this sounds complicated, and it can be complicated, but it doesn't have to be. Your kids already know this stuff. So they can help you. You can have the conversation, go, did you hear all those statistics? Like, help me figure out how to keep you and us from having those conversations with Tristan and his wife, right? I mean, so you can go into the settings, set up family accounts, and now you can create all kinds of boundaries, all kinds of restrictions. And so as an example, on Will's phone, well, on both of them, they can't add or delete any apps without permission from Autumn or I,
Right.
like a passcode.
Right.
Okay? So they can't change anything on their phone.
Right.
They don't have Safari as an internet browser. So they don't have any social media, and we can talk more about that in a minute, but they don't have any social media apps.
Right.
The games that they have put on their phone, they can't be games where they can chat with other people while they're playing. Okay?
Yeah.
And all this sounds like, man, that's the worst parent as for a kid. And it maybe feels like super restrictive. I don't know that it really is that restrictive for them. Carson just turned 12 and she got a phone for her birthday, and she's kind of still in this probationary period. So I'll tell you, one of the things is she can't add contacts to her address book right now. The only contacts that are in there are family.
Right.
So she got added to the youth group chat, and there's like 586 messages she can't read. And every day she asks me to have access to it. And I know this stuff's overwhelming and it's so hard to keep up with. So my answer is no.
Right.
It's just, I don't have time to start figuring all this out right now. You'll be fine. Right. You didn't have it a month ago. You don't need it a month from now. It'll be fine. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
let me ask, Carson, she didn't know I was going to do this. Do you have a loving father? Okay. Everybody heard that?
That's the best I can do.
Seems restricted, but the 12-year-old says yes, right? Yeah, Will, do you have a loving father? Yes, I've seen, and a big reason why I asked Bob to speak is one, because he keeps up to date with a lot of the tech sort of things. It's part of his world and that sort of stuff too. But at the same time, Bree and I are always watching. We're always looking for examples of parents. And when I see how your children interact with you, never do I get the impression of thinking, gosh, that's a really controlling family. Or gosh, those kids must hate living in that home. You know what I mean? Like it seems like there's love abounding.
No, I mean, there are days. No, there are days.
I tried. I tried.
I appreciate it. You're oversold it a little, I think. No, but it's hard to do. So on the phone specifically, set up a family sharing account, give them Apple IDs, create them underneath your family, and then you can, so another part of kind of the restriction, so to speak, is every day, their phones are restricted from 7:30 until 3 or 3:30 in the afternoon. So they can't really do anything on their phones except call or text a family member. And you can even you can only hear from these specific people. You can create approved contacts that you can communicate with during that downtime.
Right.
And you can create, whether it's games or music, Spotify or whatever, you can create all kinds of time limits and things like that as well.
Okay. Now, so you said 7:30 in the morning till 3:30 p.m. So my first reaction is, well, they do school online. All their schools. So I'm sure some of them turn in homework on their phones, or they need access to this, or to send a message, or so on and so forth. How do you work around that? What are some things that you've seen, especially today's day and age with a lot of online schoolwork?
Yeah.
How is that dynamic working for you and Autumn as parents?
Well, first of all, I don't believe that that's true.
Okay.
Now, Will and I have had this discussion before. He thinks he needs access. He's got to convince me that he's got to text these people because they have an assignment or this. And what they're really doing is they're all cheating and they're sharing answers and stuff. And I know that. And some of that is just, it's a little ingenuity. So some of that's okay.
Right.
But they don't need that. Now, we also have restrictions on any device that's in our house that's connected to our internet. So that's a different
let's
kind
take
of
a pause, actually. Yeah. Can you touch on that internet aspect of it? So pretty much everybody here has Wi-Fi in their homes, has something that's functioning that kind of way. And I think some of us see that as separate things. So my phone has Wi-Fi, my wife's phone has Wi-Fi, maybe a kid has Wi-Fi, so on and so forth. Can that be combined? Is there ways to work that to where we can see things even through the modem or through the Wi-Fi or those sort of things?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways, and there's multiple ways to do it. What we did, there's an app, and it's actually a device as well. It's a hardwired device called Circle, and it was created in part with Disney. Now, a lot of routers now, Netgear routers, come with this as an option. Okay? And what it does is it creates basically a net over your Wi-Fi access. So, and I'll tell you, there's a couple of really cool things about it as a parent in terms of motivating. But what it does is anytime any device connects to your home network, it pops up on the app, on my phone, on Autumn's phone. So I know when Autumn's little sister comes to visit from Atlanta, then I get a little ding that's like Lindsay's iPhone connected to your network or whatever, right? But then you have the ability to put all of those devices underneath a certain profile. So in my house right now, we have a profile for me, a profile for Autumn. We have a profile for all of our streaming devices.
Okay.
So Amazon Fire Stick or Roku or any of those kinds of things, right? PlayStation is on there. And then each of our kids have their own profile. So their laptop that they've been doing schoolwork on, their phones are under their profile. Now, once you do that, now you can set up certain restrictions. As an example, no YouTube on the kids' stuff when they're trying to go to school. The problem is Claire needs to watch some YouTube videos because that's part of her assignment. So the deal that we struck with her was, all right, you got 45 minutes. None of your teachers are asking you to watch YouTube for more than 45 minutes. She takes advantage of that every single day. Whether they're assigned or not, we get a little notification that's like, Claire has reached her 45-minute time limit on YouTube. But it allows you to create those profiles, whether it's adult content or other things like that. And, again, like, it's not the easy, it's simple on the front end. It's the managing of it that can be challenging. And it's just hard. And so they know that I'm not the best at it, and they got to give me some grace, and we're going to try to figure it out. But there were times, especially with online school, where they needed access to certain sites because that's where assignments were posted or whatever, and they were blocked for some reason. And I'm like, I don't know why they're blocked. And so I would just have to like turn everything back off so that they could get their work done. But it's just a work in progress.
I'm glad you said it was hard. Because that's the truth. Like, it's not an easy thing. And that's true with parenting, though, in general. Like, for example, when your child's 1 year old and you come home from work, it's still hard. There's still hard things to do. And then when they're 5 years old, it's hard. And then when they're 13 years old, it's hard. And then when they're 25 years old, it's hard. And all of these sort of things are difficult. And I also want to touch on this point as well. I think it's important. If you have a home where mom and dad are both present, this takes both of you, okay? It takes both of you. So I'm going to speak to dads for a minute because oftentimes my temptation, and my wife can attest to this with a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, my temptation is I've worked all day, okay? My wife has the privilege of being able to stay home with the kids. And so I say, okay, I've worked all day and I come home and my kids need me to do bath time or read to them or help with dinner and so on and so forth. And so my temptation is to go, well, I'm tired. I don't want to have to deal with any of this. This is hard. And then I want to sort of step aside. But the reality of it is, for me in parenting, just because I'm at work does not mean I have any excuse or any reason to, when I get home, to be the one that says, let me kick my feet up and I'm not going to worry about any of these sort of things. Because to manage this sort of thing, it needs both of you. If you have that in your home, and for anybody that's a single mother or a single father, it's okay. It's just going to take some more effort. It's just going to realize you're going to have to play both roles and be able to speak into this. And then also, the church can be a resource. You can have resources to help with these sort of things. But I wanted to say that it is hard, it's difficult, but I think it's always going to be hard in parenting. It's always going to be hard, and so but we still need to be partners.
I mean, there's nothing easy about it. In the technology space, part of the agreement that we have, number one, is it's my phone. It's not your phone.
Right.
It's not your phone.
Right.
I don't care what you think. It's my phone, and I can put it in the disposal, or I can throw it out the car window. I can do whatever I want to with it.
Right.
I can also have access to it anytime I want.
That's a good point.
So everything that you do, and I've told my kids this, every keystroke that happens in our house, I know about. Now that sounds like super oppressive.
Right.
It's not that. It's just a little bit of a shot across the bow. Like, we want to know what's going on in these areas. We look at your text messages. I know just because it's kind of the things I like to know. I know that there are some other ways of getting around some of this.
I want to touch on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to touch on that. So dive into that a little bit. Other ways to get around the text messages, and then I want to touch on some of the social media aspects, because you mentioned your kids don't have it.
Yeah.
And I think a common thing is, especially teenagers, the response is, but mom, but dad.
I have to have it.
Everybody else has it.
I got to get a ride.
Right,
okay. Snapchat, whatever.
So touch on some of the things of getting around maybe messages.
All right, so Tristan brought up the hidden apps. You don't really even need to do that. Carson is a real creative person. With one of the new iOS updates on the iPhone, you can actually change all the icons on your apps yourself. So you can change them to whatever you want.
How nice.
Yeah, and your parents would never know.
Good.
So you can change everything, right? You can create shortcuts. Even though it says it's one thing, it does a shortcut and opens something else, okay? So that's why for us, you can't install apps without a discussion first, without permission.
Right.
You just can't. And so that keeps a lot of that from even sort of being an issue. You don't have access to the internet. One of the things about like Instagram, for example, if your kids are on Instagram, if you're not on Instagram, you need to get on Instagram. If your kids are.
So we're encouraging parents to download Instagram.
I'm serious.
But
you need to know. And what I would suggest to you, I'm looking at my phone right now. Autumn and I have talked about this, and if you hit the little search bar at the bottom of your Instagram, it pulls up a whole list of things that it thinks you're interested in. Now, I only follow a few people on Instagram, and none of them are bikini models.
It's fair.
As far as y'all know.
It's verified.
But if I hit the search button, so it's some kind of mind-reading algorithm. I don't know what it is, but it shows stuff that I never searched for.
Right.
That I shouldn't be looking at.
Right.
Just by itself.
But that's just a press of the button. That's a press of a button.
That's the press of a button.
Tap.
What I wanted to say though, there's a person that you can write this name down. The guy's name, if you're a parent and even your kids, Colin Kartchner, COLLINKARTHCTCHNER, Kartchner. KARTCHNER, Colin Kartchner. He's in Utah or somewhere, and he gives these talks about saving the kids and keeping them off technology. But what you'll see when you follow him is all these responses from kids who talk about how they were suicidal, and then they finally heard what he had to say, and they got off of social media and how destructive it was.
Right.
And so when you have those conversations with your kids, it's like, I don't know the world y'all are living in. I didn't have to deal with this as a teenager.
Right.
So we don't want this, right?
Right.
I mean, we don't want this pain in your life. We don't want this problem in your world. Like, let's work together to not deal with this.
That's good.
You know, you mentioned the Notes app. So, you know, you can check all your kids' text. By the way, they can delete line by line certain parts of text message conversations, if you didn't know that. So when you pull up a text conversation, you can delete certain parts of it.
Right.
The Notes app, you just share a note with someone, and now it's like a virtual bulletin board. So you can write back and forth whatever you want. You can attach pictures. You can do whatever you want. It never shows up as a text message.
Right.
Okay? So, I mean, it's everywhere.
It's a lot of stuff.
Inside of Instagram, even if you have like adult filters on web access on the phone, if you go into Instagram, you can search a person's Instagram page.
Right.
Say an adult film person. Then when you click in their bio, the browser that operates within Instagram
Right.
is not Safari.
Okay.
So it's not affected by any of the filters that you have in place. So you can basically search through the entire internet through Instagram without any.
Yeah. I know that's
sort of
very
fence.
common. I know that's very common in a lot of social media platforms. You can go onto Reddit or Twitter or Instagram, like you're saying, and search in there and use it as a browser. And so I have found there's an app called Covenant Eyes as well, which is prevention for pornography and those sort of things. And Oftentimes, even with those sort of apps plugged in, I think the temptation may be too to download an app and then just say, oh, I've got this app on there, I'm not going to worry about it anymore. But the reality of it is, for a lot of things with our teens and just the ability they have to navigate these phones, is they can just go to another app or whatever it is, search in that browser, and sometimes those things won't pop up on some of these apps that we have. And so it takes diligence in that.
I think the same is true for Snapchat and TikTok. Mm-hmm. I thought TikTok was really cool. Like when TikTok kind of first started coming up,
Did you
I was
make
like,
TikToks?
We made a TikTok.
Okay. Did you?
Well, our family did.
Okay. I just want to make sure there's no
and
TikToks out there.
It was fantastic, by the way. It was one of them was in like a big comfy, and they were doing this dance. Anyway, it was amazing. And then the next morning, Autumn and I were sitting there, and I pulled up TikTok, and there was a young woman screaming profanities at her mother in the kitchen. Was the first thing that showed up, like really out loud.
Right.
And I didn't do anything. I mean, that just right. Is what it is.
That was trending.
It was trending, I guess. So TikTok, Snapchat, I mean, it's just so dicey. It's so dangerous. And if your kids are on it and you're not on it, that's just stupid. Yeah. You got to know and if you're on it and they're on it, they also have another profile, so you can't see it anyway. So, I mean, right. It's crazy.
It's a difficult thing.
Yeah.
It's a difficult thing. I'm glad you mentioned the one thing about being able to get onto those apps. Okay, so that's part of it as parenting, being able to work some of the things that they're able to see. And then I think another important part that Bob touched on that I don't want you to miss is Bob wasn't saying that he's just going and saying, no, absolutely not, leave me alone, we're not going to talk about this. But rather there's conversations happening. There's discussions happening about these things. You know, his initial response may be, no, you're not doing it, right? But there's a conversation going on, and I think that's an important piece as parents. I think it's an important piece in all aspects of our child's life. I mean, I see this a lot in relation to their faith. I see it a lot of times where they may have a question about their faith, and sometimes as parents, we don't know the answer, or we don't want to take the time to figure out the answer, and so we just say, I don't know, no, don't worry about it, figure it out on your own. But I think as parents, we have to have that responsibility, whether it's with their faith, whether it's with their technology, whether it's with their friends, whether it's with school, whether it's with any of these sort of things, to be able to say, okay, I'm saying no, but let's talk about why I'm saying no, and let's work through this. So then it's not, well, my mom just hates me, my dad just hates me. That still may be there, but we can talk about it. So I get laughs out here because some of you are like, my child tells me that all the time.
Well, one of the things that came up was music.
Okay, yeah.
And it's funny because you just realize how old you are really quickly when you kind of cringe at the music your kids are listening to, but then you remember the music you listen to. And so that was a little bit tricky. And so one of the things that we did for that was a paid Spotify account, but you can actually set up a family account. Mm-hmm. Now, Carson and Will each have their own profile, and I have the ability to make sure that they're not allowed explicit content on their profile. So they can listen to whatever they want, but just not explicit content. Right. You know? Yeah. And it's just, I mean, part of the struggle, and I've had this conversation with my kids, like, I didn't have to deal with this stuff. This was not, when I'll tell on myself just one story. I was at UNC Chapel Hill basketball camp when I was in middle school. Mm-hmm. And during a break or whatever, we're hanging around in Chapel Hill. And I remember we found a stranger to go into a record store and bought a tape, a 2 Live Crew album. Okay.
More laughing.
When I was in middle school.
The parents have also listened.
Well, so we listened to it, and it was like wonderful, I think. I don't know what was great. I mean, it's terrible, right? But then I threw the tape away before I came home because I was afraid. I couldn't bring it in my house. Like, I wouldn't want to get caught. But like, that was a lot. That took a lot. Like, I think we probably like snuck out. And we had to like go through a lot of work to get there. Now it's just like, no, it's right here.
Right there. All the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's great. I appreciate that. During our question and answer time, I think Bob's going to have some other sort of answers that he'll be able to give as you guys are thinking of some questions. And I think he's going to even want to ask some questions to some of these students out here. So I'm saying that now so that we actually do it. But can y'all just give it up for Bob for a second, please? Thank you. And Jordan and Robin, you guys can come up now as well. Thanks, appreciate it. And so from the Council of Adolescents here, I'll let them introduce themselves. We have Jordan and Robin here, and they're going to take a seat for us. Yeah, they got the bright lights. The lights are...
You guys will get
the light. Yeah, you get used to it. You adjust. I see everybody now. When you first come up here, you don't see people as well, but I see everyone now, so you'll be okay. You'll be all right. But well, let's start. Jordan, let's start. Could you introduce yourself and just a little bit about yourself, maybe share what you do at the Council of Adolescents, those sort of things?
Hello, so I am Jordan Ledford. I'm the Executive Director at the Council on Adolescents. I've been there for a little over 7 years, I believe. I started out as the Teen Programs Coordinator and then moved into the Executive Director role about 5 years ago. Awesome. I've had experience over the past 10 plus years working with youth through a variety of ways. I coach volleyball out at Fred T. Ford. And a variety of other avenues. I do not have children. I will go ahead and make that disclaimer. And the more we talk, I'm like, never gonna have kids. I do have a niece and nephew, so their lives are difficult because they have several parents. Because I'm an added parent for them. But
right.
So.
Awesome, thank you, Jordan.
I'm Robin McGraw, and I've been a health educator at the Council on Adolescents for, I'm not going to say how many years, because that'll give away some of my age. Not only do I do that, but I also work in pediatric and adolescent medicine. I've also worked in a church with youth, too. So I've done a little bit of everything. I have 2 sons that are pretty much grown now, yay. And they came along right when cell phones had the ability to take pictures. So that was a lot of navigating that for a while.
Absolutely.
And for all you children or teenagers out there embarrassed that you had to come with your parents tonight, I teach sex ed in the school systems. And one of my sons, 8th grade, I got scheduled to teach his class. And I said, oh gosh, it's a whole week you're in the class with them. And I said, I'm not going to do that. I'll switch with someone. He said, Mom, just go ahead and get it over with. He said, just do it. I went into the classroom thinking nobody's going to ask a question. Everybody's going to know I'm Hayden's mom. They're going to be embarrassed to say anything. I couldn't even get finished with what I was teaching because they felt like it was okay. 9th grade year, I also got his class again. I said to him, I promise I won't do it this year. He said, just please get it over with. It's okay. So it goes back to if you talk to your kids, they do tend to be okay with things.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so I just want to say I'm just so thankful that they were able to come. Casey and Ike, many of you know them. They have a relationship with you all in the council. I believe Casey used to be there as well at the Council of Adolescents. And so they helped us connect. And I'm just so grateful that they were willing to come here on a Sunday evening and be able to share. They have a lot of wisdom and knowledge in these sort of areas. And in that email that I'll send out tomorrow, I'll include some of the links that they have as well. And so they'll talk about a few things, that the programs and different things that they have going on there. And I'll include those in that email. And so I just want to encourage you just to look into more of those sort of things that they're doing. Just if they're having an event that's a parent sort of talk or with the student sort of thing, participate in that, join that, do something in that sort of area. And so I want to just kind of look at this. So the paper I have here, one thing that they do is called Parents Chat. Okay, so Parents Chat, and the CHAT stands for Communication, Healthy Relationships, App Safety, and Technology. And as you look on their website, a lot of the things that you see are based around having conversations, if that's correct, right? Having conversations with your teenagers, and then also teenagers having conversations with their parents and being open and honest about these sort of things. And so I would love if you guys would touch just even briefly a little bit about some of these Parent Chat things. And so some of the things that they have on here is how to talk to your child about dangers on the internet, online predators and how they get access to kids, online bullying and how you can help your kids deal with it and stand up to it, sexting and what to tell your children about, and the dangers of sexual solicitation, and these sort of things, what you can do to keep your kids safe. And so I'll preface this first with saying that they do these sort of lessons in 3 teachings over days. And so there's a lot of information that they have available for these things. So maybe you'll be able to participate in one of those actual ones. But even just briefly, could you all talk on maybe some of the things you see in terms of maybe what kids are exposed to, pornography-wise, sexual solicitation-wise, the sexting, the bulletin, just kind of in that realm, really open to whatever you want.
I guess I'll start by saying I'm in a classroom with kids. So they have the opportunity, knowing that most of the time I don't know their names. Now, this year, the classes that we did teach in, some of the kids I got to know their names because I felt like I was there for like months because we had to divide up and go A and B days. But as a whole, I'm with them a whole week. And I don't know their names, I don't know who they are, and they're allowed to ask questions, either out loud or written. And we give them a chance multiple times during the week to ask questions. So many of our questions, when you read them, you realize they're asking these questions because of things they have seen or watched. Majority of them have to do with pornography. The things that they think are realistic that they see in pornography that aren't realistic. I think that's very sad, especially the relationship part, that they don't have the ability to understand. And what they think is normal and abnormal about even how sex is with someone, from asking those questions. And I only have at the most 4 to 6 hours with them a week, once a year. So it's really hard to be able to get them to understand the difference in what they're seeing and what we're teaching. I guess other things we see, sexting, that's a huge problem. I don't know of any class that I can ask that question. Does anyone know someone that sent a partially nude or nude photograph or sexually explicit photograph to someone? That half the class will raise their hand. That they know someone or either have had one sent to them in class. Those are some of the things that I feel like are really upsetting to me, because most of these kids don't realize, hey, I sent it to my boyfriend, or who I thought was my boyfriend today. A month from now, he's not my boyfriend, and they've sent it to everybody they know. So, and they're very embarrassed sometimes by that, and then it's kind of shocking sometimes they're not. So,
I'm glad you touched on that aspect of pornography and the warped view of sexuality and sex that they see, because I mentioned earlier that having these sort of conversations and the things that they have access to on their phone isn't just affecting them temporarily. It is affecting them when they get married one day. And they have this dynamic in a marriage, and it's a warped view of what sex is supposed to look like. But as you all are saying, I mean, they've seen this possibly since they were 10 years old or 11 years old, or these sort of things.
And a lot of times it's by accident. I mean, they're
That's
not
a good
going
point.
and searching for it. So parents, I mean, I don't want you to panic, but a lot of times it's by accident. And then, of course, curiosity, one thing leads to another, and they've, gone down this rabbit hole, and then they're stuck with, once again, that view of
that's a good point.
sexuality and sex and the healthy relationship and all of that. So And another big thing we've seen or we've been approached about is cyberbullying, especially with students being on their computers so much more in the last year. That's been a big issue, and how to combat that, and if my child is cyberbullying or if they are being cyberbullied, how to combat those issues. And once again, it just goes back to communication between parents and their children.
Yeah, that's good.
and I don't think most teens realize that what they put out there is out there forever. It's not out there for 5 minutes, or I can delete it and it's gone. They don't realize that, and I think that harms them also, because we spend time talking about what you're posting and what you're not posting on the internet, what pictures you're putting out there, what that's saying about you, how 10 years from now, what is that going to say about you when you may not even think that way anymore? So we spend a lot of time in classroom doing that and talking about those healthy relationships.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think we see that in the news constantly with people who are in careers. And then they say, oh, you tweeted this in 2012.
Yep.
You're fired. I think we don't recognize, though, but how long these things last.
Even if you delete it.
Even
It
if you
doesn't go
delete
away.
it. Screenshots, they stay. They're all these sort of things.
Well, and I think when I realized it, both of my sons played a sport in college, and when they were being recruited, both times the coaches asked them had they posted anything that
That's
was
interesting.
inappropriate or anything that said something negative about someone else or another team,
Right.
because they would have to look at that on whether they could still recruit them or
Right.
not.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very, very common. Could you guys touch on maybe a little bit on maybe even how to begin a conversation? Like, how do you, as a parent, how do you start a conversation with your teenager? Maybe they're 16 years old. Maybe they've already gone down this road, or maybe they're 11. But how do you kind of begin these sort of conversations in a healthy way to kind of similar to what we talked about with Bob, to where you're not the bad guy. You're not just, oh, this is oppressive, right? But rather having communication about what would you guys recommend maybe?
Go ahead. She has the children.
I don't have all the answers, but first of all, I would say start them as young as you possibly can. My older son, I started a little bit later. My youngest son in second grade, we started talking about a lot of the stuff I teach about in high school, just because he was being exposed because he had an older brother who had friends over a lot. So you have to think about that too when you have younger children in a household with older teenagers. But when you start talking to your children, first of all, don't have any distractions. I think that's a big, huge thing. Make sure that they have 100% of your attention. I always found the best place to talk to my kids was in the car, because they're trapped, for one thing. Second of all, they don't have to look you in the eye, and you don't have to look them in the eye. And they can't necessarily see the expression on your face when they answer a question. So sometimes that's a good thing, too. But talking to them to where they have your attention 100%. Starting off with small things. You can't start off with the big things and think they're going to open up and tell you everything. You may have to start off with small conversations and repeating and repeating and repeating those conversations over and over again, even if they say, I've heard it 100 times. It's a joke in our family. My older son, we used to talk about boundaries, setting boundaries when he started dating. And boundaries. So when he would walk out the door, I would say to him, boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. And that became a joke. But we started off not talking about sex, but setting boundaries with drugs and alcohol, tobacco. And then that kind of led into some of the other things. And we do the same thing in a classroom, talk about setting boundaries, not just with one risky behavior, but all the risky behaviors that are there.
That's good. That's good. I've had a couple of parents even share with me, telling me, listen, have the conversations in the car, just like you mentioned, parents have shared. As your kids get older, continue to have those conversations, and also at night, right before they go to sleep. We go into the room, say, hey, sit on the bed with them, have that conversation. And oftentimes, even with my 6-year-old, as my wife puts her down to sleep and gets her ready, or if I do, oftentimes my 6-year-old will begin to share. She'll start telling stories from earlier in the day. She'll start saying what's going on. And those conversations just you have to keep having them, keep continuing them, keep going in those sort of things.
And
Go ahead.
I know one of the important things, and this just doesn't come from what I do here, but it's one of the questions we started asking when I do well checkups, when I work in pediatric and adolescent medicine, is having a time at least 2 to 3 times a week that the whole family has the ability to sit down and eat a meal together. No electronics, no television, nothing but everybody sitting at that table and having a conversation. That is such an important thing to happen, and I think it happens less and less as families. We started that rule when our kids were young. As they got older and got phones, they had to be put up. And they're adults now, and we all, at least once a week, still sit down and eat a dinner. And of course, now I don't have to say, put your phone up, or they just automatically don't even care to have it.
Yeah.
So
That's a good point. Jordan, did you have something?
And I think, too, you were asking about how to start the conversation. Try not to overthink it, but try to find teachable moments. Those teachable moments will probably come at inconvenient times. When you're trying to fix dinner, you're trying to get out the door, whatever it may be. But if something comes on the TV, on the news, if they're telling about one of their friends, something they posted on the internet, trying to use those teachable moments to then go further and have deeper conversations.
Yeah.
Like I said, they probably will not be at great times, but once again, just trying to find that time to focus and open up and have those conversations.
Yeah, that's good.
And if they ask a question and you don't know an answer, be honest with them.
Yes.
That's more realistic to them than anything. Be honest, say, I don't know the answer, but I'll find it out for you. I'll make sure we can find it out together. But be honest and let them know that you don't know the answer to that.
Don't send them off to look for it. Don't,
Yes, please
don't tell
don't.
them to go look for the answer, because who knows what they might come
That's
back
a
with.
great
Yes.
point.
We will find it together.
Yes, that's a great point. I'm glad you said too, Jordan, about the aspect of inconvenient times, because I think that's so true as parents, because I think a lot of times as parents we want to sort of push all of the blame on our children for being the ones that are addicted to the social media or addicted to the phones, and we just want to say, well, why don't you stop, or this is all your fault, or they just thinking all this. But I think the reality is oftentimes is maybe our children are coming to us with questions and we are here. And we go, yeah, hold on. Hold on. And then they go, Dad, yeah, hold on. And they go, Mom. And then what they do is they go, forget it. And they walk away. And then what they've learned there is, well, Mom and Dad do this.
Yeah.
I can do this. What's the big deal? So I think that's so true. Cooking dinner, when maybe you are, maybe as a parent and you have to send emails through your phone, and you're sitting there and you're trying to type out an email and it's important and you feel like there's a rush. Can I just say, and I think y'all will attest to this as well, can I just say that there's nothing more important than your child's conversation and your child's question in that moment. That email that you have to send or that work thing that you have to do, they can wait. They are going to be okay. You're not going to get fired. You're still going to have your job, but your child needs those conversations, needs that attention. I think that's very important. I'm glad you said that with inconvenient times and those sort of things.
Well, and I think you're also showing them the role model thing.
That's good. Yeah.
And the other thing is, I think teens need to have more than one role model than just parents. You all have them involved in church or other things. Those are ways that they have other adults, too, that they have role models from and can have some conversations with. So.
Yeah, that's a good one. You talked, you shared a funny story just about teaching sex ed with those sort of things. So now, as a church, and I know you've done conversations with a church or through your own church and these sort of things, but as a church, do you think it's okay to have a retreat or some sort of conversations about sex? Because I think a lot of times, I know we're fortunate here at Discovery that this isn't taboo. It's not. For those of you that hear it this morning, I'm going to say it. Pastor Smith said, it's like a 90-year-old stripper. He said those words in the sermon. And then the best part to me was 3 minutes went by, and then he apologized by saying, once again, 90-year-old stripper. And so it was good. But I say that as a positive thing, that we are at a church with a senior pastor who is not sugarcoating things, and he's rubbing his eyes. It's not sugarcoating things, and it's not shying away from these sort of things. And so could maybe you even speak on your experience? And Jordan, I don't know if you have any experience with this as well, but experience maybe if you've been to one of these sort of things, but experience just even having those conversations.
I was fortunate enough to belong to a church that believed in sexuality education for the youth. So our church always had, for middle school and high school, they called it sex camp, the teenagers did.
It's the worst
they
name.
Went away.
It's the worst name ever.
Sex camp.
No, well, it is a good name to get everyone to sign up, but it's the worst name for everything else. People are sex camp.
So then we go away to sex camp.
said go away.
Middle schoolers went for like a day-long retreat.
Yeah.
High schoolers, it was a whole weekend. So, and then you had to be the adults with them for that whole weekend. And poor one of my children had to do that too. I forgot about that. So, somebody came to me in the church and asked would I be interested in doing it. This was before I had this job. And I said, oh no, I've never done anything like that before. And they said, well, I'm a Presbyterian. And they said, Presbyterian puts out curriculum. We want you to use the curriculum. And I thought, oh, it'll be really, nice, simple curriculum. No, it's more than what I could ever teach in a classroom in a school. It was really, really good curriculum. And it was broad curriculum. So I was fortunate to have someone at our church that also worked at the health department, and she had done a lot of that, so we did it together for several years. And the teenagers actually really became bonded, I felt like, that were on those trips, because they asked any and every question they could think of to ask us. And I think it was because, again, we were some role models in their lives. We hadn't just walked in that day to start teaching them. We had been with them since pretty much their whole life. So they felt comfortable with us. So that's another thing, having those positive role models other than parents in their lives.
That's good.
While I do not have any experience with sex camp, we do just feel like this conversation and the conversations about sex, I mean, obviously that's what we do for a living. We go into the schools and we have these conversations. Needs to happen everywhere, especially the church. The church is supposed to be a place where you can feel comfortable, you have lots of role models, and you can open up and be yourself. And so we, of course, think these conversations need to be happening. I don't know if every church wants to have sex camp, but we do think it's obviously just very important that the church takes on this subject matter.
Yeah, that's good. And I know one thing that's been shared with Bree and I that I know a lot of you as parents do, and that I've heard from a lot of parents as well, is when your child gets to like 11 years old or 10 years old or whatever age it is, you plan. So my son, maybe Ezra, gets to 11 years old. I plan a trip where I'll go to the mountains maybe, and we'll get a cabin there, and that trip, the purpose of it is, okay, you're transitioning here into this puberty stage or just even a middle school, and I know these things are happening and so on and so forth. And so we're going to go and we're going to have this conversation. And at the same time, we're going to have fun. We're going to go skiing or go out or whatever it is. And the same things with moms and daughters. Planning something special out to where you go and you make that a special moment to where you're able to have these sort of conversations, and you incorporate those phone conversations in there. And I know a lot of you sitting in here are like, well, my child's not 11 anymore. They're 14 now, or they're 16 now. It's not too late. It's not too late. This summer even, or this fall, or in the winter, whatever it is, plan one of those things out. So maybe it's not through the church. It's a great option. I think it's an option that we need to incorporate within our student ministry. But if you have a 14-year-old, a 16-year-old, plan something out and say, hey, just you and I. We're going to go. We're going to get a cabin. Maybe we'll go to the beach, whatever it is. And we're going to have these sort of these conversations together. I think that goes a long way with your children, and just being able to be open and honest in those conversations, in those sort of things.
The other thing I feel like, coming from a church, so many kids in a classroom will ask us, why is sex bad? It's something bad. They feel like it's something bad, whereas if it's talked about in the church, I know the curriculum I used, it started off as it's a gift from God meant to be used responsibly.
Yes.
Now, I say the same thing in class. I just about God because I can't say that in a classroom, but that it's a gift meant to be used responsibly.
Yes.
Because I feel like so many kids think it's something so bad, and it's not meant to be that way. And if we talked about it in the church, I feel like they would understand that better.
Yeah, that's good. Jordan, can you touch on some of the other programs, just some of the other things that the Council of Adolescence offers? Because I know even on the website ads, I was looking, I saw the Teen Talk and these sort of things, and then also I even saw, and this isn't relating necessarily to technology, but I want to touch on that. I think this is important because I think it's relevant for us here, but I also saw some things in regards to like vaping and maybe what you're seeing and some of the conversations or maybe even what's out there. Both of you can touch on that, but even some of the other programs as well.
So our Healthy Youth Education Program is where Robin comes in. She's the health educator along with several other ladies that go into the school systems and teach puberty and reproductive health. So the school systems contract out with our agency to come in, like I said, and teach the puberty and reproductive health. So in Hickory Public Schools, we start in 5th grade, and in Catawba County Schools, we start in 6th grade, and it goes up to 9th grade. So those programs, they build upon themselves each year. They are age appropriate, medically accurate, and sequential information. So we're not throwing all this information at them, when they're in 5th and 6th grade, but each year they're getting a little more information. So in those classes is where we, talk about puberty and the changes, that their bodies are going through, as well as healthy relationships. We talk about sexual violence. We talk about them, social media and technology, the sexting, that falls into then the healthy relationships and all that. It all is intermingled for sure. And then we will also touch on vaping. It just depending on the time and how chatty the class is and that sort of thing. We also have a Lunch Buddy mentoring program for middle school students. I can go in more on that if you would like later. And then the Teen Talk and Smart Moms and Dads programs are also the teen pregnancy prevention. That's our main initiative for sure at the council. So we cover, just a variety of topics depending on, like I said, the classes, the students that we have, whatever they're facing. We have a curriculum that we use and certain topics we have to cover, but a lot of times it goes kind of in various different directions depending on what they have going on. So.
Right, makes sense. That's good. I don't know if you're on or not.
Okay, I had one thing I wanted to kind of follow up on what they were talking about, the talk.
Yes.
And I can tell you individually about my experience, some of my experience with the talk with Will, and it's hysterical. But what I wanted to tell you about that is it's completely awkward. Like it's horrible. And if you asked him about it, like he's probably shaking his head right now. Like it is not fun. And that's how I have the talk is I don't want to talk about this either. And I know you don't want to hear from me.
Right.
And I know I don't want to have to tell you this, but we're going to have this talk. And Drew Sigmund introduced a curriculum, the Dennis Rainey Passport to Purity. And it's a whole audio series. Comes with a book, a workbook. It's designed for this getaway, okay? It's designed for you to take your son or your daughter away for a weekend, and it can be really as kind of orchestrated and as extravagant as you want. We've done some of that, but a lot of times, like you guys were mentioning, it was in the car, and we just start listening to the content together, and we have the conversation. And now it's a place where, in fact, even just yesterday, I can check in with him about that. Hey, how are things going on that?
Right.
On that front? You know what I'm talking about, right?
Right.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, Dad. Right? But are we still good? Everything good? And we can kind of revisit that pretty regularly, even though it's still totally awkward and I'm sure he hates it. But if we just have to start that conversation, so that piece of material, that Passport to Purity, has been helpful.
That's good.
Yeah.
Passport to Purity. That's good. Any questions? JB's got the microphone. He's back there. Could you put a hand up, and don't be shy. Don't be shy on me. If you could put your hand up with any questions you may have in regards to what we spoke about, or even, we got one over here, JB. I've got lights on my face. I'm seeing better than you. JB doesn't have his glasses on. We've switched places. He's gone no glasses, and I've picked up glasses.
So you mentioned that your kids don't have any social media apps on their phones. So what age or when do you think that is appropriate? And when, I guess your daughter got her phone at 12, so I guess that was the other question, was when do you think phones are appropriate for kids?
That's good.
Yeah, so I don't have a real structured answer to that. I mean, it just kind of worked out for Carson's 12th birthday, and it seemed like it just kind of seemed like it was the right time. There hasn't been a specific time for when they get a phone, but then for her, it's just a phone right now. It's not like a whole lot of other stuff. So that's kind of one way that gives us a little sense of relief about that. As far as social media, I got in the car not long ago and picked Will up from somewhere, and I just bit his head off. And I said, you maybe will get social media when you get married. And he was like, what are you talking about? And I was just so disturbed and disappointed in my social media world, in this political climate and in the world that we live in, that there's nothing good about it. There's nothing positive about it. And so y'all can just wait and trust me, you're not missing anything. So I don't know. I mean, at some point they're very persistent. They're gonna wear me down. I don't know when that'll be, but it's just not now.
It's good.
How do they communicate with their friends? Text message or email. I mean, even Claire emails now, and she's got like a couple friends she emails and some family that she emails, and it's all text message. And I've talked with some other friends of ours with kids, and they're like, I can't get rid of Snapchat. That's how they get rides places, and this, that, and the other. That's not true. No. It's just not true. Like they will figure it out. They don't need Snapchat to get a ride anywhere. They don't.
It's good.
Sounds good, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they say that because they don't think we know any different.
yeah.
But we do. Or we should.
Got some other questions. Can't see as well. JB's moving. He's got two. We got two hands over here.
Thank you for doing this. One question I had was, how secure are these systems that our kids are doing this online, this virtual learning? How secure are those systems?
They're not. So we ended up in a conversation with school administrators. Autumn, was it 7th grade or 6th grade? 6th grade. Because they'd all figured out how to bypass the filters. So they teach each other how to bypass the filters on the school system. And that was upsetting to me. And when we met with the school administrators and the technology guy, he's like, you wouldn't believe, if I had to change whatever to keep up with about, and so they're not secure. One thing I'll say, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'll say, so I heard this just a week or so ago. You guys were talking about social media and that, for the teenagers that are out there that are posting things, and the idea of once it's out there, it never goes away and all that. Another way to look at that, that's true. That's very true. I mean, the idea of have you ever posted something in the past and now maybe you won't get accepted into college or be recruited? That's a nightmare to think about. Another way to think about that, I just heard this the other day, was that someone can pull up something that you said however long ago, and it immediately appears as if you said it yesterday. Okay? I said some really stupid things when I was 20, or when I was 16, or when I was 25, or when I was 30. I hope I've grown, okay, from that time until now. But when you put stuff out on social media, then all of a sudden when it shows back up, and this is why people's TV shows are getting canceled and they're getting fired from their jobs and all this, because when all of a sudden there's a post attributed to Tristan that he posted something when he was 16, he's gonna lose his job at Discovery Church because it's as if he said it yesterday. That's the impression we all get. And that's partly ridiculous, but also terrifying. Right? Because there's no time frame attached to those posts. All of a sudden, we just think that it's right now.
Yeah, it's good. JB's over there. Kaylee, I believe, right?
How do we approach our parents with these questions? I mean, as a 14-year-old, I find it ridiculously difficult to read a room and just be like, hey, Mom, hey, Dad, can you answer this for me? Because, it's just weird.
You answer the question. You do.
Not after your mom's worked for 12 hours. Give her a minute.
So that's good. First off, Kayla, I love your questions. Number one, I love all the questions that you ask. But she said, how do you approach your parents? How do you approach your parents with these conversations? First thing I want to say is I love that initiative. I hope that as students in here, you feel that same kind of initiative that even Kaylee's asking to do that. I'll start, and then maybe we can even talk about how you would like someone to approach you, your child to approach you, or your future children to approach you, Jordan. I think a big piece of that is them feeling comfortable to ask any types of questions in the first place. Them feeling comfortable to ask anything. So that comes with continued conversations. I think some of the things we heard earlier that comes with in the car rides, that comes with at bedtime when you're about to go to sleep and you're just having that conversation with your child then. The dinner table, of course, and having that, and maybe even setting aside and saying, okay, Thursday evening, we are going to have dinner, and whatever you want to ask, no matter how ridiculous you may think it sounds, no judgment, no punishment for asking this sort of question, but let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation. That's my answer. Maybe we can go down the line a little bit and we think of some other ways.
I also think every parent's going to be a little bit different when it comes to that. I know that a lot of times, like we said, kids a lot of times come to us at the busiest times of our lives when you're trying to get 15 meals ready for people coming to dinner and they want to talk to you. I would say one thing, maybe trying to read your parents a little bit and seeing if it's a good time for them, that they may be a little bit more open to the conversation. The second thing I think would be really important is just start off with a minimal conversation and kind of work your way, just like they may do with you, into a bigger conversation. I think is an easier way sometimes of going about things. I know when my kids were younger and one would come in and say, okay, I got to tell you something, but don't get mad. Then all of a sudden you're in panic mode as a parent because you think, oh no, what have they done? But that made me pay 100% attention too. So it got my attention for sure. So that's another thing that I think sometimes just saying, I've got to talk. And I think most parents hopefully will understand that.
That's good.
Yeah, I think also, part of our conversation with our kids, and I mentioned this earlier, is we didn't have to deal with this growing up. So I don't, Greg, I don't know what it's like. It was hard enough just being a kid and navigating friendships and ball seasons and school and all the things anyway. I can't imagine the weight that you guys are under to try to navigate all this. And so part of our conversations are, I don't know. I don't have the answers. I don't know how to deal with it. We need to work on this together. I mean, and even as far as, the idea of pornography and sexually explicit images and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I've told Will and there's nothing that you have seen that I haven't seen. There's nothing that can come across your screen that I haven't seen. There's no conversation that you can have. I know where you are. Right. And so all those conversations, we got to have them together because I know the damage that can be done there. Yeah. And that's actually what we talk about is I know how destructive this can be. I know how destructive it can be for your relationship with your sisters, with your mother, and with your friends. I mean, that's just the reality. It's scary, and I don't have all the answers, so we got to keep talking about it.
And I think just knowing that it's going to be awkward at first, that's okay. It's going to be awkward for you. It's going to be awkward for them, probably more awkward for them. That's okay. Just knowing that your parents love you no matter what, and they want you to come to them rather than to go to the internet. So just being okay with that. And it will be awkward at first, but it'll get easier. And then you'll want to go and talk to them about things that come up and as conversations and things get more difficult. So being okay with awkwardness at first.
Yeah, I'm glad you just said that, because I want to do something for a second. Parents, I want you to raise your hand if you are going to love your child regardless of what they come and share with you. Can you just raise your hand and just show? I mean, students, look, because that's a real thing for a lot of you as students, is thinking, I can't share this. My mom or my dad is going to be so disappointed. They're going to be so just upset at me. They're not going to trust me. They're not going to talk to me. They're not going to care about me. They're not going to love me. All these sort of things. Listen, you saw the hands in the air. Each and every one of these parents want to have that conversation with you as students. And when that conversation is done, they're going to still love you, and they're still going to be mom and dad. What it's going to do is bring you closer together. And so don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid to be awkward. Don't be afraid to be inconvenient to them. And don't be afraid to say what you need to say. Okay? And like Bob mentioned earlier, they've probably done it, or they've probably seen it, or they probably have their own things to be like, listen, I understand, I don't understand, and I do understand. You know, that sort of dynamic. Any other questions? Again, don't be shy.
And I just want to say one thing to all the students that are in here, the youth. Jordan and I have done these kind of talks for, I don't know, several years now. And out of all the years we've done this is the largest crowd we have ever even come close to having come with parents interested in. So every one of you that are teenagers out there, you're blessed to have your parents, because they care a lot about you to be here tonight.
It's true. Yeah, that's really good to mention.
Yeah, I have a question. So, sorry. You could, in theory, do everything as right as parents, and you could censor them, and you could make sure that you're on top of what they're going through, but then they get exposure from a family member, or then they get exposure from somebody who operates by a different set of roles, or at school. So how do you deal with the peer influences and or even family members who might not be abiding by those same rules and principles?
That's a great question. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know how to answer the family members part of that. I don't quite know what that looks like. So we've had hard conversations with friends about some of these situations, and our kids have had some experience while they're at somebody else's house with some of this. I'd say as parents, you have to be really leery of your kids' friends who have older siblings. I mean, you just do. You got to be aware of that, because they're in a different place. And so, Claire is in 4th grade, and she's here now. She has 2 older siblings. And so she's learning stuff that she maybe shouldn't learn, but that's how it works, right? I don't know how to do that other than to limit the expectation, like be clear about that. That's the way our conversations are with our kids. When we have other kids come over to our house, I try to communicate with their parents about kind of this is what the deal is. Like when you're here, like you're gonna maybe do some yard work and some other stuff that they might not want to. There's things that happen at my house and they don't have to be here, but if they want to, that's sometimes you get stuck doing. And same thing when they go somewhere else. I don't know. I don't know how to answer. I don't know how you deal with. You just gotta have the conversation with them, and then make sure that and then follow up. Like, how did it go? I mean, there was a bunch of boys down there spending the night last night. Like, is everybody okay? You guys get into some stuff you shouldn't have gotten into. Tell me about it. Let's talk about it. Because we found out about some of that well after the fact, and it was still imprinted pretty significantly.
I think also making sure they know your values over and over and over again in your beliefs, and letting them realize that not everybody has the same values and beliefs as you do, but that you still want those values and beliefs for them, just over and over again. And I think they have to hear it thousands of times sometimes for it to kind of sink in.
Yeah. And my wife and I have had these conversations with our daughter who's 6 years old. And honestly, the conversations we had is at this stage, at this point, there's no sleepovers. Okay, so at 6 years old, they're not going to do a sleepover. We've had a conversation at 10 years old, and this is our choice. This is us. Again, this is the team part of it. You know, it's not just mom saying this, and it's not just dad saying this, and then butting heads over it, and then the child going to mom or dad and saying, well, mom said, or well, dad said, right? You have to be unified in these sort of decisions that you're making. It's so important. And so these conversations happen between my wife and I, and we say, okay, at 10 years old, no sleepovers. You know, at 16 years old, no sleep. You know, but within that, I mean, we talk about it because it's true. Oftentimes, the majority of times, maybe majority is a lot, but I'll say it. I don't care. Most of the times, a lot of the teenagers are getting exposed to pornography or to things at sleepovers when they're with an older sibling there, or at a house where the parents just don't think of it as much, or they don't care as much in that kind of way, or they don't put the restrictions on. And so for us, we say, you know, that's scary for us. We don't want our child to experience that. And so, but part of that at the same time is we're going to have conversations with Evelyn. And we're going to say, this is why I know this is birthday party's happening. I know you're 10, but this is why you're going to go until 9 or 10, and then we're going to come get you. You know, but it's having that conversation so that she at least hears from us, if that makes sense. Again, that's a personal choice that may be different from you all or different from people on stage, but there are conversations that are happening to get to that choice.
Well, I think, too, we have to apply the same grace that we have for our kids in these conversations to other parents, because this is, it's horrible to try to navigate.
Yeah.
And so when you have those conversations with other parents, you know, there's some friends of ours who have a teenage son who's just a little older than Will, and his name came up in conversation with Will and one of his buddies, and I heard some really disturbing things about what this kid was up to. He's on Snapchat, and he's smoking weed, and he's doing this, and he's doing that. And so I just kind of heard it, and then I went back to Will, and I was like, all right, tell me about this. Like, what do you know about that? You know, this is just what I've heard. Okay, Will doesn't have Snapchat. So it doesn't matter. They're going to get to it anyway. So then I had to call the parents, and I said, I got to come over and talk to you about something. This is what I heard, and we're not going to another funeral.
Yeah.
That was a hard conversation to have. And thankfully, they were like, we know.
Yeah.
We're in counseling, we're doing this, we're doing that to deal with it. Like, thank you for coming to talk to us, whatever. I don't know, but you don't know about all, we all as parents, we're all having conversations about these other families and what they're doing with their kids or not doing with their kids, and we're finding out all this stuff, but then what if it's yours?
Right.
And nobody's telling you?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So we've got to be willing to have those conversations, but not like in a real exclusionary way, but just, this is what I'm hearing, this is what's going on. Maybe true, maybe not, I don't know, but this is hard enough job. Let me help if I can, you know?
I'm so glad you said that, because as parents, our job is not to gossip. Our job is not to gossip about other parents' kids. And our job is not just to strike down judgment on them and say, I can't believe this is happening. But as Jesus said, to speak the truth in love and to be willing to have a conversation with another parent with grace, like you mentioned, Bob, in a grace sort of way, and saying, this is what I've seen. Let's talk about this. Because I know for a fact that there's a lot of parents sitting out here probably wondering maybe what my kid is doing, and maybe wondering, does somebody else know and they're not telling me? You know, as parents, you want to know, and you want another parent to be able to share that with you and be able to have those conversations. We need to be on each other's side as parents. Other questions?
So,
Anything good?
for phones and online texting and stuff, what do you think an appropriate age for that is?
Never. Just kidding.
For online texting your friends, or just accessing the internet?
Communication, like social media and other things.
social media and other things, texting, just ways to communicate with one another?
Yeah, I mean, you're not ready. I mean, that's just my view. Like, most of the adults in here are really bad at this, and we're adults. You know, we can't talk about things online without, you know, really irritating somebody or making someone in our family mad or whatever. Like, we don't process that well. There's no way on earth y'all can. It's such a challenge. So I mean, I don't know it's up to you and your family kind of what's appropriate in terms of what. I think that there is some value because of some of the dangers we've talked about. We just touched on briefly.
Yeah.
But just kind of being able to access your kids when they're in other places. You know, we worry about that now more than we used to. You know, I would be gone out of the house all day and my parents never knew where I was, but I would eventually make it back.
Right.
You know,
There you
and that was that. So now we don't feel that comfortable with our,
Yeah,
even in
true.
our neighborhoods, we don't feel that comfortable with our kids. So, and part of the responsibility of having a phone in our family is you better answer it when I call.
That's good.
That's it. I mean,
Yeah,
and
that's
we've just
good.
had that conversation today. But it's like, you know, if you want a phone, you answer it when your mother or I call. That's it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's a vague
Robin.
answer.
Well, and I also think learning the appropriate times to be on social media. When I'm in a classroom, I always teach kids, don't ever get on if you're mad, sad, or lonely. Those three things, you'll talk to a predator, you'll post something you shouldn't, or you're more likely to post pictures or things about yourself that are personal information that you shouldn't be giving out. That's probably for adults, should go by that rule too, but I
true.
definitely think for teenagers, knowing when I'm in the right state of mind to be on social media.
That's good. Yes. Becky. I'll repeat it.
Question for parents, because like I know there's like the circle and there's apps, and I know girls I work with have the 360 app, so you can tell where every person in your family is. But and I know like for me, you know, the schools like have power schools so that you can see your kids' grades, and like you are bombarded with all of this information. So you know, not that I don't want to keep my children safe, but how as a parent are you supposed like what are you supposed to do with this ton of information that comes at you daily, you know, from the school or, you know, like, you know, I mean, literally, one of the girls I work with was like, oh, my kids just checked in at home. Oh, like, I mean, it just, you know, it's like another, I mean, you worry about them all the time anyway.
Yeah.
And with all of that, I feel like, you know, at what point do you like that, where you have to have some trust in your, I mean, you know, you're teaching them, you want them to do the right thing. I don't know if I'm asking that correctly, but
No, that's good.
as a parent, like how are you supposed to filter all that information to teach them the, you know, the right things to not be extremely overwhelmed yourself because of all the information that
Yeah.
you're getting all the time?
It's good. For the recording so the camera can pick that up, is it how do, as parents, we handle all of that information maybe without being overwhelmed, or how do we handle being overwhelmed by all of that information? I don't know if you guys have any thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, the sort of cynical answer is suck it up. I mean, it's a lot, but they're dealing with a lot also. And we have to figure out a way to get engaged in that world. The idea that my kids are on Snapchat or Instagram and I don't know what that is and I don't have it on my phone and I can't see it, and so I just think that it's a way for them to get rides to and from school, or that TikTok is a way to do funny cat or dog videos. Like if you don't have it, then that's, you gotta know what's going on. You have to know. Now, Power School, I mean, we kind of divide and conquer. There are certain things that Autumn sort of manages and monitors with our kids, and there are other things that I kind of do. I'm also not particularly uptight about they checked in at home or this, that, or the other. I mean, I have some of those things in place, but you know that I think that's everybody's a little bit different about that. I don't know whether you whether some of that's necessary or not. But again, I'm also 14, 12, and 10. And so it's like, you don't have any freedom. Like that's just part of the deal. I mean, you have trust and you have love, and we work within that, but you're not paying any bills. So.
And I kind of agree with him with a lot of it, that they don't have the ability to have some of these things until they gain that ability and that trust to be able to do some of those things. I know with my kids' Power School, I didn't check it every day because that was their responsibility to be a good student. And if I found out, I checked it periodically, but it wasn't something that I stayed on them constantly about because I felt like something was on them all the time anyway. So that was one of the things that I left kind of to their responsibility. So I don't know if that was right or not.
Yeah. I think I would say this as well. I think as parents, we're also guilty of significant screen time. We're also guilty of being on our phones a significant amount, or our jobs requiring it, or checking our emails constantly. And so on top of what our children are getting and what we're getting sent from them and the notifications and all these sort of things, we also have our own things that we're getting notifications for and we're getting alerted for, and just the text messages or emails and so on and so forth. And so I would also say to set boundaries for yourself. And so at home, just putting that sleep button on the phone that turns off all notifications for you. A certain time, putting the airplane mode on and saying, you know what, if this phone call does not need to come through right now, I can handle this in the morning. And so even that aspect as parents, just as adults, can be freeing in a lot of ways, because oftentimes we are constantly overwhelmed and consumed with notifications and these sort of things. And so even just personally, just saying, okay, from this time period for myself, here are my boundaries. Here's when I'm going to put the sleep mode on, and so the text will still come through, but I'm not going to see it pop up. It's not going to come to my Apple Watch or the Samsung Watch, or it's not going to come to my phone, and I can have the freedom for that, so that when I'm dealing maybe with some of my child's notifications, it doesn't feel like it's a combination of both. So maybe a thought.
I think there's one other piece that we haven't touched on, and I thought about this within the last 2 weeks in some of the conversations I've had with other parents. Like, I love technology, and it's amazing what we can do. And we've talked all evening about how terrible it is and how destructive it is and how awful, and all that. It can also be great. And a good friend of mine, he spends all of his social media efforts are like food that he's cooking with his family, or encouraging his kids and saying nice things about them. Like, it's all positive all the time. And I thought about a week or so ago in a conversation, I thought about, that's something I don't do very well, is use this technology to now share a word of encouragement, a text message, share a verse of scripture, share a conversation using this technology with my kids. I don't do that enough. We just talk about like, nah, shut it off, or too much screen time, or you're rotting your brain out, or whatever. Right. When it's like, they're on there, and maybe we can use, we can be a little bit more positive with it too. So
it's good. Yeah, I like that.
So Tristan, I got one. I know we're getting towards 8 o'clock here. First of all, you guys are doing a fantastic job with this. I mean, just an incredible, and I appreciate all the information. Yeah, go ahead and clap for them. Doing a fantastic job. And I feel like we're just way behind. I feel like this should have happened years ago. And I'd almost have a kind of a little panic. I'm making lists of different meetings we need to have and what we need to incorporate, because really, as just a faith community, we need to have the same perspective all the way down. And this needs to start way down in the elementary, at the elementary level in our children's ministry. And I know we talked about this, like it's technology, our war on technology, but after listening to this all night, we're talking about, what was the statistics on suicide? 5 hours?
Yeah, it increases by 71%.
Suicide, what is the poison that is in that social media platforms relational dynamic? What is the poison that drives a child to kill themselves? I mean, if we were talking about a drug, but somehow or another we want to play footsie or patty cake with this stuff when it's terminal.
Yeah.
It's technology's war on our children is what it is. That's what it is. It's technology's war on our kids. I'm gonna tell you, after just listening to this tonight, Discovery is going, we're putting to the pedal to the metal in terms of we need to have a lab where parents come in and we walk through. Bob, you walk us through, because you'd have to, see, my youngest is a sophomore in college. It's too late. It's over. It's too late. There will be a time when it's too late. Too late, maybe 16. It may be 18. I'm not really sure. But there is a time when you just lose the opportunity to control anything. And so there's a period of that child's life, maybe it's 10 to 16, maybe it's 10 to 18, where it's just got to be a priority because their life and the health of the relationships are at stake. And so I just want you to know we're going to bump this up. And I know there's a lot of people here, and I appreciate you saying, but this place needs to be full of people. We need every parent, because our kids influence each other. The idea we can't go to a sleepover because I'm afraid of what they're going to find out and all. We need to get control of this. Yeah. And it needs just to be running through our whole community. I thank you so much for putting this together for us. And I know y'all had to research this, and Bob, hats off to you, man. You're doing a great job with your family, great job with your kids. You and Autumn, because I know she's really behind it. You're up there, but.
I'm trying to get her to sign up for sex camp.
That's it. We're done. We're going to be done.
Well, you just lost that opportunity, let me tell you. But
that's it.
Yeah, I got a lot of different notes here, but I tell you, it's technology's war on our kids, and it's messing with their minds. And we've had too many conversations about suicide, and that just doesn't need to be happening. Yeah. So we're gonna figure that one out. I don't know. Do you know, Tristan? What is it about screen time and its relationship to suicide? Why does the increased screen time produce suicidal ideation or activity?
Some of that research I saw too, it said, even in that 5 hours, even if they're just watching cat videos for 5 hours, it still increases it. So there's a dynamic where it is the social media, whether the comparisons and feeling like they're not good enough, or they don't look good enough, or this sort of body shaming aspect of it. But I think science, and we are continuing to learn the hormonal aspects of looking at these phones for hours on end. And then a big piece of this is a lot of the time that this screen time is happening is at night before they go to sleep. And so instead of putting that away and falling asleep easily, the light that they are getting then is affecting their brain and keeping them awake. And so instead of our children sleeping 8 hours a night, they're sleeping really 5.
No
4.
phones in the bedroom.
Good, right, exactly. They're sleeping 5 or 4. And so now they sleep those few hours, and you may think, well, my kid sleeps till 1 o'clock. Well, a lot of times it's not real deep sleep happening there. It's not a real good sleep pattern happening. And so those are affecting the hormones and those sort of things, which is causing it more and more. So then they're barely sleeping, then they're going to school or doing all this online stuff, which is on the computer again, and then barely sleeping again. And this cycle just continues and continues and continues. And as parents, you all know what it does when you have a newborn or you have a child and you're up all night and you feel like you're going crazy. And you're an adult and you feel like you can't control the hormonal thing that's happening. Well, now think of the 13-year-old that feels like they're going crazy, then feels like they have nowhere to go for it, and then listens to the music and watches the videos, and then suicide and depression is elevated into this thing to where it's cool. And so now you're like, well, this is what I'm supposed to be. This is just how it is.
And Simon Sinek, if you look up some of Simon Sinek's comments on this, Smith, he talks about the dopamine release, and some of the things that happen when anyone is on social media and on these platforms, and how that specifically is targeting our kids in a way that's so damaging, because it legitimately is an addiction. I was just talking with a counselor last night, and she has teenagers in rehab facilities for technology addictions. Like right now, there's a book called like Glow Kids. Has anyone ever heard of that? Glow Kids, I think that's what it was. Glow Kids. We'll put that, there's a book about how to rehab and kind of disconnect from that social media and that technology addiction. And it really gives sort of a step-by-step approach in terms of how to get out of that. And we'll put some of that information out as well.
We've seen studies, it's like today's day and age is like a cigarette. That the phone now is what, for people when they get addicted to cigarettes, is picking it up, smoking a cigarette, get another cigarette, get another cigarette. And now we get these things and it's the same thing. It's the dopamine. It's, a notification, something goes off. Oh, somebody liked this, something goes off. Oh, I got another message, something goes off. And so that's the same sort of thing, the same sort of addictive sort of things. And I want to be sensitive to our time. It's 8:07 now, and I know some of you may have some more questions, and I would love if you could even just come up. You can ask us individually some of these questions, and the things that we talked about this evening, I'm going to put an email together and be able to send those things out. And then also I had a question during the break time of just some resources, some books or videos and those sort of things. I'm going to include those in the emails as well. There's a lot of good books, a lot of good resources, Christian ones as well. A lot of people have written some good resources about technology and about the smartphones. Some of the things that Bob just mentioned, we'll find that as well. And it's on the screen. Look, thank you, Greg. Appreciate that. So there you go. So that's one of them. And I'll include links in that. And so as you get that email, just have it as, you don't have to read through all of it right away, but just keep it, maybe flag it in your email as a resource to go back to look at some different things and that sort of thing. And again, if you have another question you want to ask one of us maybe just right afterwards, feel free to come up. And again, I just want to say thank you so much to all of you that are here. When this video is posted, please share it. Please send it to the people you need to send it to. Encourage people to watch it. Again, this is part one. We're going to continue this, as our pastor mentioned, pedal to the metal on these sort of things. We're going to continue these conversations, seminars, different aspects of this. And so just be on the lookout for that. Let me close us in prayer, and then we'll be dismissed this evening. Father, again, we just thank you for this time. We just thank you for just the people that were willing to share. Father, we just thank you for their time. And Father, I just thank you for these parents and these students and these future parents even in the room that are willing just to commit this time to raising their children and to being better parents. It's difficult, we know, and it's stressful and it seems overwhelming, but God, we know that you provide the things that we need, that you have blessed us with these children, that you have put us responsible for these children. So Father, we trust that you will provide the strength and the patience and the power to raise them. God, I pray for these students. Father, I pray, Lord, that you would just work in their lives in a way that is just removing this depression, removing these suicidal thoughts. And Father, I pray that you would just empower them even to get rid of the social media, to be the ones that look different with their peers and with their friend groups and with their schools. Father, again, we praise you and we thank you for all that you do, Father, and all that you are. We pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Again, thank you all again for being here this evening.